So it really was possible for Ron Hextall to get something done at the NHL trade deadline. And you know what? He really did. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I'd ask that you check out my daily shots of Steelers and Pirates as well. It's Penguins versus Blue Jackets tonight at PPG Paints Arena. And according to Hextall, he hopes to have Ricky Rakell in the lineup. And won't that be neat on a bunch of levels? Rakell, of course, was acquired yesterday from Anaheim for Zach Aston-Reese, Dominic Simone, second-round pick in the coming draft, and goalie prospect Kalle Klang. And that, my friends, is a really, really good trade under the circumstances that I outlined in yesterday's episode as being challenging, but not impossible, as I was beginning to think that the Penguins were suggesting. It almost sounded like they were making excuses in advance, when in fact, now, as they've proven, they were just laying out how tough it was going to be. And Hextall reiterated that yesterday after the deadline in elaborating a bit on what made it tough.
Typically, when you go into a deadline, you feel like you really have to make a deal, or you don't necessarily have to make a deal. And quite frankly, I didn't feel like we had to make a deal, and neither did anybody on our staff up there. But if we can improve the team, we certainly owe it to our players and the organization. Everything's got to fit together, and quite frankly, with our cap situation, it's not easy to fit things together. If we could have kept, two players that we moved, we would have loved to, but in a cap world, things have to change. And so we felt like our secondary scoring has been a little bit of an issue. It's came to life a little bit lately, but I think whenever you can add to it, we think Ricard adds a lot to our group in terms of the skill part of the game, and really makes us, certainly in our top 9 and our top 12, makes us a lot deeper. It gives Sully some good options on the wings and also in the middle. So we're excited about the acquisition, and hopefully he'll be here to play tomorrow night.
Well, good for him. Good for Brian Burke. Good for all of their individual evaluators and everyone who came together on this. It's a very similar process, from what I understand, to how they acquired Jeff Carter. A lot of focus was placed on one player, one target. And from there, a lot of work was done to make sure that he was the right fit, a term that Hextall must have used a dozen times yesterday, and that they could somehow still come up with the best offer, the one that would get the Ducks to agree, even though they were more up against the cap than the other teams, specifically the Bruins and the Rangers, who were also in on Rakell. That's just, generally speaking, really, really good general managing. And it's a feather in Hextall's cap before Rakell even takes a shift in black and gold. This portion of Daily Shot of Penguins is brought to you by the good people at the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank, where they're committed to providing food for all of our neighbors in need across Western Pennsylvania. They, in turn, need your help. Find out how $1 can be turned into 5 full meals. For those in need, visit pittsburghfoodbank.org. Heck, I didn't even mention that the Penguins got the Ducks to pick up 35% of Rakell's remaining salary, and he's making $3.8 million this year, so that they could squeeze him under their cap, because Aston-Reese and Simone put together don't make what Rakell is. As I look at this trade, it's hard to even share opinions with you without coming across as insulting because I see this as such an obviously good deal from the Pittsburgh standpoint. Also, as pretty much a no-lose deal from the Pittsburgh standpoint. Yeah, Rakell could come here and be a complete bust. He could forget how to score for the first time in his life. He could not be the guy who's already got 16 goals this year. He could not be the guy who actually had more goals than anyone in Anaheim over the past 8 years in total. And, oh, by the way, he could hit unrestricted free agency this coming summer and leave for another team, at which point the Penguins will have given up, some capital along the way. A second-round pick isn't nothing. Kalle Klang might not be nothing. But, man, otherwise, I don't think it requires much of a leap to picture Rakell being on a line with Evgeny Malkin, who finally have a right winger that he wouldn't have to borrow from Sidney Crosby. And let's say for now, Danton Heinen, maybe it's Jason Zucker once he's healthy, but you'd have yourself a second line. You'd have yourself top 6 wingers flanking Gino really for the first time this year. So you'd have a top 6 as opposed to a top 3 or top 4, which will help a lot of things about this team's balance. You also, in turn, then can start moving other wingers, better wingers, down the depth chart a little bit to work alongside Jeff Carter, Teddy Bluger. You get Brian Rust, of course, back up there with Sid where you want him. And a lot of things just make a lot more sense. Now, you do lose with Aston Reese and Simone, especially Aston Reese, a couple of penalty killers, guys who contributed to the league's number 2 unit. And you can do that with one guy, maybe 2, and not feel it. But without Aston Reese and with Brock McGinn still on IR, there's going to be some challenges with that group. And that's something I'm expecting to have come up both today and tonight with Mike Sullivan. But add all of this up, including leaving Boston and New York, or teams that you could be seeing in the playoffs, out of the Rakell mix. This is just a great big W across the board. And if you haven't paid much attention to Rakell in the decade that he's put in Anaheim, this is a good hockey player, and he's been a consistent hockey player. He's never run up the massive numbers, but he's fast, he's shifty, he finds holes, he finds vacancies the way the better goal scorers do. He also can create his own space, which is kind of a shortcoming with the Penguins' current group of wingers. He's not the world's greatest defensive forward, but playing under Sullivan, you're going to find out real quick at least how to handle the basics in the Pittsburgh system. It's a good trade. I'm not going to go overboard. I'm not going to suggest he's going to be the second coming of whatever it was that happened to Jeff Carter when he showed up here last spring. But he's a good addition. Ideally, he'll also be that coveted good fit. When we come back, just one question. And today's J1Q comes from Kenny, who asks, so what do the lines look like now? Then again, when Jason Zucker is healthy. Line questions. I always have to cheat a little bit and look at however it was that the Penguins last utilized their lines, and that, of course, given that they practiced yesterday, would have been what they sent out on the ice in Cranberry. Let's take these and then try to modify them. All right. Yesterday's line in practice had Sid, Jake, and Evan Rodriguez. Now, that's not going to be the case. You're going to see Rust move back up with that group. So the second line was Heinen, Malkin, and Rust. Now, Heinen and Malkin are going to stay together, as I mentioned, at least until Zucker is back. I have no doubt, based on things I've heard from Sullivan, that he really likes Zucker and Malkin together. So let's presume that this is temporary for the purposes of answering that portion of your question. So it's Heinen, Malkin, and Rakell. Duh, right? Okay. The third line yesterday in practice was Simone, Carter, and Kapanen. Well, Dom's not going to be around for everybody to kick anymore. So let's say that Heinen or Zucker would be the player that's there alongside Carter and Kapanen or Rodriguez? Don't know there. For what it's worth, the closest Kapanen has come to clicking with anyone this season has been with Carter. Now, there are people inside the team that will tell you that Carter's the easiest center of all with whom to click because his style is so straightforward. It's so rod hockey, if you follow what I'm saying. You know where he's going to be. You don't have to wonder what he's going to do when he gets it. And as a result, he's a lot more predictable. That makes it easier to adjust. And maybe because of his own straight line approach, Kapanen could learn some of that as well. However, I'll repeat that there's also Rodriguez floating around now that we've obviously kicked him off the top line. So, who's left? Brian Boyle, Teddy Bluger, and the right winger on that line yesterday was Aston Reese. Obviously gone now. So, do you go with Boyle, Bluger, and Kapanen? No. That wouldn't make any sense. Because what you want to do, obviously, with Boyle and Bluger is have them be a line that you can depend on to handle the tougher assignments, the things that Sullivan will assign Sid to do whenever he didn't have Teddy. Remember that? And it didn't go very well. So let's instead put Rodriguez on that fourth line, because then you can have, kind of a buzzsaw effect from that group. The speed that Rodriguez brings could offset the speed that Boyle doesn't bring. You also put yourself in the critically important position of making sure that you've got enough penalty-killing forwards. And regular listeners know that story that I've shared several times now, where Sullivan described to me how he makes up his lineup for that night. It starts with the penalty killers. So you need to make sure that you have X number of those guys available. Now, what happens to Radim Zahorna, Drew O'Connor, Valtteri Puustinen, and anyone else that you might be considering from Wilkes-Barre? Well, it's pretty clear what happens to them. I'm not sure that there's going to be space for them. Obviously, injuries are always a factor, and that goes double in the playoffs, but I don't think you're going to see too many surprises otherwise. I really think the way I laid out these lines is the way it's going to shake out. But you know what? The first indication of that comes tonight at 7:08. Looking forward to it. We'll talk about it tomorrow on Daily Shot of Penguins. Thanks so much for listening.